I used to believe there was a limit to how far my family would go to make me feel small, but that Thanksgiving proved there was no limit at all. If you have ever sat at a table where people claimed to love you while cutting you down with a smile, then you already understand what that night felt like. My name is Harper Collins. I am 31 years old. I run a tech company based in Seattle, and last year alone I cleared more money than my parents have earned in the past decade combined. Not that they know any of that. To them, I am still the daughter who never measured up, the problem child, the quiet one who never fit the Collins version of success. And if you ask them, they will tell you that I am barely scraping by, that I never figured out life, that I am nothing compared to my younger sister Olivia. But the truth is simple. They never bothered to learn who I became, and on that Thanksgiving night, they finally said the quiet part out loud. The house smelled like rosemary, turkey, and polished oak when I walked in. Everything looked perfect, the way my mother liked it: matching plates, coordinated napkins, candles that all burned at the same identical height. It was a holiday page straight out of a magazine, but behind the shine was a coldness I had known my whole life. Olivia rushed over to hug our parents, as if she were the star of some family commercial. I stood there holding a small gift bag of local chocolates, suddenly aware that no one had even looked up when I arrived. I took my usual seat at the far end of the table, the one that always felt like it belonged to a distant cousin, instead of a daughter. My father cleared his throat dramatically. I knew that sound. It was the same sound he used before delivering a speech about Olivia winning something, achieving something, or simply existing. But this time, he did not look at her. He was looking straight at me. "Harper," he said, loud enough for the relatives on the other side of the table to hear. "I think it is time we stop pretending." The room went still, the kind of stillness that makes your stomach clench before your mind catches up. "Pretending what, Dad?" "Pretending that you have a future," he said. "You are 31 and you have nothing to show for it. Nothing. You are a disappointment to this family." A faint gasp moved around the table, but no one stepped in. My mother kept cutting her turkey as if he were reciting the weather. Olivia lowered her eyes, but a smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. And my chair, the one pushed half an inch farther from the rest, suddenly felt colder than anything in that room. "You should leave, Harper," my father continued. "There is no point sitting here pretending you belong. Go figure out your life. Maybe then you will stop dragging this family down." I waited for someone, anyone, to speak. But silence wrapped around the table like shrink wrap. That silence told me more about my family than his words ever could. I did not cry. I did not argue. I simply pushed my chair back, smoothed my sleeves, and stood. Every eye followed me, but not with concern, with relief, as if my absence made the room easier to breathe in. And here is the hook you need to understand all of this. While they told everyone that I was lost and aimless, I was earning more money in a single month than they had in an entire year. While they painted me as a burden, I was building systems that kept other companies alive. And while they saw me as the weak link, I was becoming the only person who could save them from the disaster they were sleepwalking into. But they did not know that yet. All they knew was the story they liked best, the one where Olivia shined and I faded into the background. I stepped outside into the cold November air. It hit my skin like a clean slap, waking me in a way the entire dinner had not. My breath came out in a soft fog. Behind me, the laughter at the table picked up again, louder now that I was gone. That familiar ache in my chest settled in the same place it always did, but something new rose beneath it, something sharp and clear. I was done earning a place in a family that never wanted me whole. As I walked down the driveway, the lights of the Collins house glowed behind me, warm, bright, false. I realized in that moment that you can love a place your whole life and still never belong to it. I also realized something else. People who refuse to see your worth will always assume you have none. 3 weeks later, those same people would be sitting in a room with their hands shaking, their voices cracking, when they learned the truth. Not the truth about my success. The truth about the loan they secretly tied to my name. The truth about what they forged. The truth about why their lives were about to collapse in front of them. And that is where my story really begins. Not with the humiliation, not with the silence, but with the moment I finally stopped letting them define who I was. If you have ever been pushed out of your own family, keep listening. My story is not just about revenge. It is about finally taking back the power I never knew I had. When I walked away from that Thanksgiving table, it felt like I was leaving a lifetime of something behind. But the truth is, I had been leaving that family little by little since the day I understood the way they saw me. That night was not the first cut. It was only the first one they made loudly. Every wound before it had been quiet, practiced, and perfectly disguised as family tradition. People like to say childhood shapes you. But mine did not shape me. It thinned me out, stretched me, and taught me how to shrink so I would not take up too much space in the Collins household. Growing up, Olivia always shined. She was the golden child, not because she worked harder or cared more, but because she performed the kind of daughter my parents wanted. Loud enough to show off, pretty enough to display, charming enough to distract from the cracks in our family image. Meanwhile, I learned early that invisibility was the safest place to stand. My father loved to brag about Olivia before she even did anything worth bragging about. At age 8, she played a messy version of Twinkle Twinkle on the violin, and he called her a prodigy. That same year, I won a countywide literacy award, and my parents did not even go to the ceremony. My mother said she had a hair appointment. My father said he did not want to sit through something boring. I still remember what I wore that day. A navy dress with a white collar. I stood on that stage expecting to spot their faces in the front row. Instead, I only saw empty seats and a teacher trying to smile in their place. By the time I was 10, Olivia had a wall full of framed certificates. Most of them were participation awards that my mother had matted and hung like museum pieces. My achievements were kept in a drawer, not even a neat drawer. The junk one in the kitchen, the one that held expired coupons and broken pens. I learned something then. Some families do not want two successful daughters. They only want one star and one shadow. That shadow was always me. When I entered middle school, my interests grew beyond what my parents considered normal. I liked taking things apart, fixing old radios, building little programs on the family computer. It was the only time I felt smart. The only time something made pure sense. Machines never lied about what they needed. People did. But my family called it a phase. A distraction, something that made me look strange at family gatherings. Olivia would tell relatives, in her sweet practiced voice, that I was still trying to figure myself out. My mother would nod as if she were forgiving me for something embarrassing. I worked hard anyway, built websites at 15, taught myself coding at 16, created small automations that people actually paid me for. When I showed my father the first check I earned, he laughed and said, "Cute hobby. Now, focus on something real." I folded the check into my pocket and decided never to show him another one again. What hurt most was not their dismissal. It was how natural it came to them. As if they had always rehearsed for a world where Olivia mattered, and I did not. Prom illustrated it perfectly. Olivia went in a shimmering dress my parents bought from a boutique 2 towns over. I went in a simple dress I found on sale. My mother took hundreds of pictures of Olivia and maybe 2 of me. Both rushed, both blurry. Olivia got a limo. I got a reminder to be grateful. College was supposed to change everything. It did the opposite. When I chose technology, my father told people I was studying computer nonsense. When I left college to build my own company, he said I was embarrassing the family name. The thing is, I did build something real, something successful, and I built it alone. Thousands of miles away from people who still believed I was a confused girl chasing a childish dream. But even as I built my life, their voices traveled with me. Not because I still believed them, but because childhood has a way of echoing long after you leave the house where it began. So when they humiliated me at Thanksgiving, it did not shock me. It simply reminded me of every smaller moment that came before. All the little cuts that softened me into someone they assumed would never stand up for herself. But here is the part they never understood. When you raise someone in the shadows, you forget that shadows learn to move quietly, and quiet people see everything. I saw the favoritism. I saw the lies. I saw the way they rewrote my achievements as accidents and Olivia's as miracles. And I learned something I never said out loud. The day would come when their version of me and the real me would collide. That Thanksgiving just happened to be the moment the collision began. As I walked back into my Seattle penthouse after the holiday, I could still hear my father's voice telling the table that I was nothing. But I also heard something else, a quieter voice, one I had ignored for years, my own. It was telling me that the story I had been living in was never mine. It belonged to people who needed me small, and I was done being small. What I did not know that night was this. The same childhood they used to weaken me was the foundation that would make me strong enough to face what came next. And what came next was the first crack in the perfect Collins family image. Because soon, I would discover the secret they had been hiding for years, and once that secret surfaced, nothing about our family would ever look the same again. People always talk about the moment a family breaks as if it happens in one loud shatter, a scream, a betrayal, a slammed door. But the truth is quieter. Families like mine do not break all at once, they crack in the little places first. A whisper here, a lie there. A truth reshaped so many times that eventually no one remembers what really happened. When I returned to Seattle after Thanksgiving, I carried the weight of my father's words with me. Not because I believed them anymore, but because they confirmed something I had spent years trying to deny. My family was not cruel by accident. They were cruel because it made their world easier. For a few days, my apartment felt muffled, like someone had turned down the volume on everything I normally heard without thinking. I worked, I answered emails, I sat in meetings, but there was a strange emptiness around me, the kind that usually shows up after a loss. Except I had lost nothing. Not really. You cannot lose what you never truly had. Still, something inside me kept replaying that dinner, the smile Olivia tried to hide, the way my mother kept her eyes down, pretending to cut turkey while my father told me to leave, and the silence that followed me out the door. A silence that felt practiced, familiar, almost expected. I should have known that silence meant something more. 3 days after I returned home, I was in my kitchen waiting for water to boil when my phone buzzed. The name on the screen made me straighten. Aunt Mara, the only relative who had ever looked at me like she saw a whole person, instead of a shadow standing next to Olivia. Her message was short. "Harper, we need to talk. Your mother has been saying things about you. Call me." My chest tightened, not because I was surprised, but because I already knew the tone. I had heard it my entire childhood. Concern mixed with hesitation, pity tangled with warning. I called her immediately. She answered on the second ring, voice low as if she were afraid someone might overhear. "I thought you should know," she began. "Your mother has been telling people you are struggling. She told everyone at church that you are basically homeless, that you have been sleeping on couches in Seattle because your tech work fell apart." For a moment, I felt something close to dizziness. Not from shock, from recognition. This was the same story my parents had been feeding about me for years, just louder now, bolder, public. I looked around my penthouse as she spoke. 3 bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows, a space I earned without a single dollar from the people who called me worthless. I leaned against the counter and let the contrast settle into my bones. "Of course they said that," I finally replied. "It is the version of me they like best." Aunt Mara sighed softly. "I told them it was nonsense. But they do not want to hear the truth, Harper. They want the story that fits their image. Olivia the star. You, the lost one. The lost one." I had heard that label in 100 different forms. Every time they dismissed my interests, every time they called my work a phase, every time Olivia stood next to my parents with their approval, shining on her like stage lights, while I stood in the wings, unseen. But something about hearing it now, after they had thrown me out of their home, hit differently. It was not just a lie, it was a narrative, one they had been crafting for years. I thanked Mara and hung up, but her last words stayed with me long after the call ended. "They do not want to know the truth." That was the part that stung, not the lie itself. The intention behind it, a deliberate refusal to acknowledge anything that did not fit their story of who I was supposed to be. It took a long time for me to understand the danger in that kind of denial. When someone refuses to see your worth, they are also capable of denying any boundary you set, any success you build, any life you create. People who erase you in small ways eventually feel entitled to erase bigger things too. The first lie is never the real problem. It is the permission it gives them. And I did not know it yet, but my family had already crossed the next line long before Thanksgiving. They had done something far worse than whispering about me behind my back, something calculated, something illegal, something that would pull me into the kind of storm I had spent my adulthood building walls to avoid. But that afternoon, I poured my tea and tried to calm the shaking in my hands. I kept telling myself it was just gossip, just words, nothing that could hurt me. I had no idea the damage had already been done. 2 days passed quietly, and I began to settle back into my routines. Work calls, investor updates, strategy reviews. I moved through the motions with practiced focus, trying to ignore the lingering sting of Mara's message. Then, on a Wednesday morning, an unexpected email slid into my inbox. Subject: confirmation required for your guarantor status. Guarantor. The word felt foreign, wrong, misplaced. I clicked the email. At first, all I saw was the law firm's letterhead. Then the number: a renovation loan nearing $400,000. A signature line with my name typed neatly above it. A signature that was not mine. For a moment, I stopped breathing. The room felt too bright, too still, too sharp. And then the truth crystallized, cold and steady. My parents had not just lied about me. They had used me. They had taken something that belonged only to me. And the story I had grown up believing about being the unwanted daughter, the unseen one, the disappointment was about to collide with a new truth that would change everything. The lies were only the beginning. The real betrayal was written in ink. We've poured a lot of time and heart into creating this story. If you don't like it, give it a like anyway, and if you do enjoy it, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Now, let's get back to the story. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen, unable to fully absorb what I was seeing. My name, my signature, a loan I had never heard of, a balance that could sink someone who did not understand the way interest grows like a slow poison. $400,000. The number glowed back at me, steady and indifferent, while something inside my chest loosened and then tightened again. It is strange how betrayal works. Sometimes it arrives like a punch. Other times, it sinks in quietly, as if it has been waiting for you to notice it. This one felt like both. The file attached to the email was detailed: documents, payment histories, copies of forms, and near the bottom of the first page, there it was. My name in a script that looked almost like mine. Almost. Not quite. A forgery done by someone who believed they knew me well enough to mimic my handwriting. Someone who assumed I would never question them. Someone who thought I would always be too quiet, too soft, too grateful to cause trouble. My hands stopped shaking. Not because I was calm, but because a deeper kind of clarity settled in. A clarity that comes only when the truth leaves you no other choice. I opened the next email, then the next. Each one confirmed the same thing. Renovation funds withdrawn, payments inconsistent, money redirected into accounts tied to Olivia's boutique, costs for upgrades to my parents' home in Portland, all of it secured with a guarantor signature that was never mine. Every piece aligned with one devastating conclusion. My family did not just lie about me behind my back, they had stolen from me. I closed my laptop gently, as if slamming it would break something I was not ready to face. Then I walked to the window and stared out at the Seattle skyline. People rushing to work, cars moving like veins of light. A world that kept turning, even when mine felt like it had tilted off its axis. I replayed every conversation with my family over the last few years, every comment they made about money, every time they dismissed my work. It all clicked into place with a quiet, merciless precision. They needed me to look small so they could use me without question. A small person does not demand explanations. A small person does not challenge forged documents. A small person does not fight. But I was no longer small. I picked up my phone and dialed the only person whose voice might ground me. Ethan Price, my attorney in Seattle. Logical, sharp, the kind of person who hears a disaster and immediately looks for exits. He answered on the second ring. Harper, what is going on? I forwarded the documents wordlessly. A minute passed. Then another. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed. This is not an accident, he said. This is deliberate. I know. You understand what this means, right? I understood too well. This was not just about money. It was about intent, about the ease with which they had written me into their problems without hesitation. Yes, I said quietly. I want to move forward, he exhaled. I could hear the shift in his tone, the way professionals sound when they lock into battle mode. All right, we start documenting everything: handwriting inconsistencies, the money flow, the signatures, the timeline. This is forgery and financial misrepresentation. Hearing someone say the words out loud made my stomach twist. forgery, misrepresentation, family. 3 words that should never exist in the same sentence. I spent the rest of the morning gathering everything Ethan asked for. Old signatures, contracts I had signed, scanned agreements, anything that could be compared. With each document I uploaded, something inside me hardened, not in anger, but in resolve. For years, they treated me like I did not know who I was. Now I was the only one who knew exactly what I needed to do. When the last file sent, I sat back and let the stillness wrap around me. Not the painful stillness from before, a clean one, a focused one. That was when the aftershock hit. Not fear, not sadness, disbelief. Not because of what they had done, but because of how easily they had believed I would carry it for them. My father always assumed I would fold under pressure. My mother believed silence was the same as obedience. Olivia thought her charm could cover anything, even crime. They never expected consequences, but consequences were on their way. Hours later, Ethan called again. His voice was firmer this time. "Once we start this," he said, "there is no turning back. It will get messy." I looked around my apartment, the one they said I did not have, the one they claimed I could not afford, and felt something inside me settle. "Good," I answered. "It is time they understand." He paused. Then, "We will move forward." After the call, I sat alone in the quiet. I could still hear the echo of my father telling me to leave the Thanksgiving table. I could still feel the sting of the lies my mother spread, but a different feeling rose now. Not grief, not anger, a beginning. Because they thought the story was over when they pushed me out the door. They had no idea the story was just starting. And they definitely had no idea which role they were about to play in it. If you have ever discovered a betrayal that forced you to finally stand up, tell me in the comments where you are listening from. Maybe you will understand the next part better than you think. I did not sleep much the night after I discovered the forged signature. Every time I closed my eyes, the documents flashed behind my eyelids, my name written in someone else's hand, the loan amounts, the transfers into accounts Olivia proudly flaunted online. There is a particular kind of heaviness that sinks into you when truth finally catches up with a lie you have lived with for years. And the truth was this: they had never wanted me weak. They had needed me weak. That realization arrived slowly, like dawn turning the edges of a window pale before the sun finally breaks through. At first it was just a feeling, a quiet idea forming in the background of my mind, but the more I thought about it, the more it sharpened. Every insult, every dismissal, every time they told people I was struggling, every moment they belittled my work. It had never been about who I was. It had been about what I could be used for. When I woke up the next morning, Seattle was still half asleep, fog resting low across the water. I wrapped my hands around a mug of coffee and looked out at the skyline I had earned on my own. A life I built brick by brick with no family support, no safety net, no approval. And yet, without hesitation, they felt entitled to use that very life as collateral for theirs. The realization hit me with a kind of clean, unforgiving clarity. They needed me to look unstable so no one would question why I was the guarantor. They needed me to look directionless, so I would not notice the debts tied to my name. They needed me to look small so they could stand taller. And maybe the cruelest part of all, they did it because they trusted one thing completely. They believed I would never fight back. I sat down at my desk, opened the documents again, and forced myself to read them slowly, painfully, precisely. The loan details lined up too cleanly to be an accident. Dates that matched Olivia's boutique expansion. Payments that covered the kitchen renovation my mother bragged about last year. Expenses disguised as business upgrades, but aligning exactly with the new furniture in their living room. They had built a life on borrowed money. Money tied to my name. Money I did not even know existed. My phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. "Tracing more transfers. You need to see this in person. Meeting at noon." I got ready in silence. No music, no podcasts, just the sound of my own breath as I tried to steady myself. At the law office, Ethan slid a stack of printed records toward me. His expression was the kind professionals wear when the truth is heavier than they expected. "It was not just the loan, Harper," he said. "There are patterns here. Multiple transfers, misrepresentation in financial filings. This was coordinated." The word coordinated made my stomach drop. Coordinated meant planned. Coordinated meant intentional. Coordinated meant they did not just slip my name in, they designed their entire financial survival around my existence. I pressed my fingertips against my forehead. So they built their safety net using me. Ethan nodded, quiet, steady. They did not want to risk their own assets. You were the easiest shield, easiest. Not because I was incapable, not because I lacked resources, but because, in their eyes, I was still the daughter who would take the blow quietly. For a moment, anger rose in me so fast it startled me. But anger was not the real feeling underneath. It was grief. Grief for the years I spent trying to earn a love that was never meant for me. For the child who kept hoping her parents would someday see her. For the woman who built a life only to watch her family treat it like spare parts. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled. They needed me small, I said. My voice was steady but low. The image of me they created, it wasn't just cruelty, it was strategy. Ethan watched me for a moment, then nodded. And now, that strategy is unraveling. The room went quiet. Not uncomfortable, just heavy with truth. I finally understood the whole picture. For years, they had been constructing two versions of me, the one who existed and the one they projected. And they preferred the projection. Small, helpless, dependent, easy to use. But the real me, the one who built companies and solved complex systems and turned nothing into something, they never bothered to meet her. And now she was the one holding the evidence. I closed the folder gently. All right, I said. What do we do next? Ethan did not smile, but there was a subtle shift in his posture, as if he felt something lock into place. Now, he said, we start protecting you, and we start preparing for what comes next. As I walked out of the office that day, I felt something inside me change. Not soften, not harden, sharpen, like a line being drawn with a steady hand. My family had spent years rewriting my story to suit their needs. Now I was finally picking up the pen, and here is the part no one ever tells you. Sometimes the moment you stop trying to be accepted is the same moment you finally become unstoppable. If you have ever realized someone needed you to stay small so they could feel big, hit the like button. It helps more people hear stories like this, and you might be surprised how many understand exactly what comes next. There is a moment in every betrayal where pain stops being the loudest thing in the room. What takes its place is something quieter, steadier, almost unnervingly calm. That was what I felt as I walked out of Ethan's office, calm, not ruined, focused, not broken. My family had crossed a line they could never uncross, and if I did not protect myself, I knew no one else would. I got home, set my bag down, and opened my laptop. Not to drown myself in work, not this time. I opened it to face the truth fully, without softening it, without giving it excuses the way I had throughout my entire childhood. The numbers told a story, and it was one I finally let myself read. Over 2 years of financial maneuvers, money moved quietly between accounts, payments missed, then made, then missed again. Renovations disguised as business expenses, and all of it wrapped neatly under a forged version of my name. The betrayal was not just emotional or personal. It had been deliberate, calculated, and co-signed, literally, by the 3 people who were supposed to protect me as a child. Maybe that was the part that dug the deepest. My family had not just doubted me, they had used me, prepared to let me take the fall if anything collapsed. I opened a fresh document and began outlining every inconsistency Ethan had mentioned. My hands moved automatically, not trembling, not hesitating, just moving with purpose. Every email, every timestamp, every transfer, every piece that proved they had built their stability on the assumption that I would never notice, or worse, that I would notice and stay quiet. By mid-afternoon, the file was thick with evidence. Ethan reviewed it over video, his face tightening with each page he scrolled through. This is more detailed than what most forensic accountants deliver, he said. I forced a dry smile. It is easier to see patterns when you have lived them your whole life. He paused for a long moment. Harper, they built an entire financial structure on your silence. I know. And I am done being silent. The plan began forming quickly. Ethan explained each step with the same methodical clarity he used in cases far bigger than mine, but I noticed his tone shift each time he said my parents' names. There was disappointment there, not for what they had done legally, but for the way they had dismissed me emotionally. Step 1. Establish proof of forgery. Step 2. Trace the money. Step 3. Notify the lender once we had airtight evidence. Step 4. Prepare for the possibility that default was approaching, which would give me the right to acquire control of the debt. That last step hung in the air between us. Control. A word my family had never allowed me to touch. You understand what this means for them if the loan defaults, right? Ethan asked. I did. Oh, I did. It meant the house they bragged about. The boutique Olivia flaunted online. The renovations my mother loved, showing off. All of it was tied to the same loan. The same forged signature. The same lie. And if the lender transferred ownership to me, everything they stood on could be placed in my hands. I nodded. Yes. And I am ready. Ethan studied me for a moment, as if searching for any hesitation hiding in the corners of my decision. You are very calm, he finally said. I am beyond anger, I replied. And calm is what comes after you stop begging people to see you. He leaned back. Then it is time to move forward. That afternoon, I signed the first of many legal notices. My initials, my handwriting, my real signature, marked the beginning of a different story. One where I was not the quiet daughter or the family embarrassment. One where I chose the next move, instead of waiting to be handed the next wound. 3 days later, Ethan called again. The loan is unstable, he said. Payments have been missed again. They are slipping. A strange mix of sadness and inevitability washed over me. Of course they were slipping. This was a house built on lies. Lies always collapse eventually. What happens next? I asked. If it enters default, he said, you qualify to take over the debt. Legally, structurally, fully. It would give you the leverage your family never expected you to have. Leverage. Control. Power. Words I had never been allowed to associate with myself. I walked to the window again, stared out at the gray Seattle sky, and felt something shift inside me. Not revenge, not satisfaction, something cleaner. Alignment. For once, the consequences were pointing in the direction they were meant to. All right, I said, start the process. He did not question me this time. Maybe he finally understood this was no longer about vengeance. It was about boundaries I should have set years ago. As we ended the call, a single thought settled into place with quiet certainty. They had used my name without permission. Now they were going to learn what that name really meant. And here is the hook one that will divide anyone listening. Do you think a family who betrays you this deeply deserves forgiveness or consequences? Tell me in the comments. I want to know where you stand before you hear what happened next. 3 weeks. That was all it took for a lifetime of dynamics to flip themselves inside out. Not with shouting, not with confrontation, but with silence, paperwork, and a debt my family never imagined would land in my hands. After Ethan warned me that the loan was slipping toward default, the days that followed felt strangely suspended. Not slow, just quiet, as if the universe were pausing to see what I would do next. I still worked, I still showed up to meetings, but beneath it all pulsed the steady awareness that something irrevocable was coming, and I was no longer afraid of it. On a gray Thursday afternoon, as I stepped out of a strategy call, my phone buzzed with Ethan's name. His voice carried something definitive, an edge that told me everything before he said a word. It's official, he said. Default has been triggered. You are first in line. The debt is now yours to acquire. I stopped walking. The hallway around me blurred into meaningless motion as the weight of his words settled. Mine. The same debt my family forged my name to secure. The same loan they assumed would disappear into the fog of my supposed failures. Now completely, legally, undeniably, in my control. A strange steadiness spread through me, not triumph, not revenge. Something quieter, like the ground beneath me had finally leveled after years of uneven footing. Move forward, I told him. He exhaled softly, the sound of a chess player acknowledging a checkmate. All right, we'll finalize transfer. After that, everything tied to the loan becomes yours to manage or restructure. Everything. Their house, Olivia's boutique, their renovations, their comfort, their entire facade, all built on a signature they never expected me to discover. That evening, Ethan came to my apartment with a stack of documents and a calmness that balanced the storm swirling under my ribs. We reviewed every clause, every detail, every consequence. You understand, he said, looking up. This effectively gives you ownership leverage. They can't refinance without you. They can't restructure without your approval. They can't hide from the debt anymore. I nodded slowly. Yes. That is exactly the point. We worked for hours, preparing notifications, outlining options, structuring the next steps with clinical precision. It was surreal, methodically shaping the repercussions of a betrayal I had never asked for, never deserved, but now had full command over. By the time Ethan left, the city outside had sunk into night. I stood at the window, watching lights blur along the streets below. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel overshadowed. I felt aligned with my own story, as if everything that had been taken from me was quietly returning not to punish, but to restore. Still, I knew something else was coming, because consequences do not exist in a vacuum. And family, especially mine, does not face truth gracefully. I didn't have to wait long. The next afternoon, as I reviewed final filings, my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen in years: Mason. My sister, Olivia's longtime friend. Close enough to the family to know things, honest enough not to weaponize them. "Harper," he said the moment I answered. "Are you sitting down?" "No." "Should I be?" "Probably. I need to tell you something before they find a way to twist it." His voice carried urgency, but underneath it, guilt. "Go ahead," I said slowly. "What is happening?" "Your parents are panicking. Olivia too. They think the lender is coming after them. They've been calling everyone asking what to do. They have no idea you're involved." I closed my eyes for a moment. Of course they didn't. The possibility that I, Harper, the family failure, could hold power over them was too far outside the world they believed in, Mason continued, and his words landed like a match hitting dry grass. Harper, they're scared. Not remorseful, scared. And they're planning to meet with the lender to beg for leniency. I almost laughed quietly, disbelievingly. They wanted leniency from the very person they tried to erase. When Mason hesitated, I filled the silence. "Tell them to meet me, Friday. Bellevue House, dinner room." He inhaled through the phone. "You're not telling them?" "No. They want to meet the lender. Let them walk into the truth." For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he asked the question, sitting at the edge of his breath. "Harper, are you doing this to punish them?" I looked out at the skyline again, feeling the calm settle back into my chest. "No," I said quietly. "I'm doing this because they left me no other choice." And for the first time, I realized it was true. This was not revenge. It was alignment. It was the consequence of their choices catching up to them in a form they never anticipated. Before Mason hung up, his voice softened. "Whatever happens, they brought it on themselves." His words lingered long after the call ended, and somewhere deep inside, I felt the final shift fall into place. I was no longer protecting myself from them. I was preparing to face them, not as the daughter they dismissed, not as the shadow behind Olivia, but as the woman holding the truth they thought would stay buried. And here is the hook, the moment that changes everything. What happens when a family who thinks they own the story suddenly has to sit across from the person who now owns their future? Tell me what you think will happen at that dinner. I want to hear your predictions before the truth unfolds. Thank you for staying with us this far. If you're busy or need to step away right now, hit like so you can easily find this video again later. Now, let's get back to the story. Bellevue House was all glass and soft lighting, the kind of restaurant where silence feels intentional and everyone speaks just a little softer. I arrived early, wearing the kind of calm I had learned to build over years of being the quiet daughter. Ethan sat beside me, briefcase at his feet, expression composed. Everything on the table was set: documents, contracts, timelines, the tools of truth. When the door opened, I felt my heartbeat shift but not speed up. My mother walked in first, wrapped in the tailored confidence she wore like armor. My father followed, jaw tight, shoulders heavier than I'd ever seen. Olivia trailed behind them, mascara smudged from crying, but her chin lifted like she still expected applause for her suffering. They didn't greet me. I didn't blame them. Acknowledgement is difficult when you're walking into a room thinking you're meeting a lender but instead find the daughter you discarded. "Harper," my mother finally said, her voice thin, "we appreciate you arranging this meeting. We're hopeful this is all a misunderstanding." I said nothing. Ethan opened his folder and placed 3 packets in front of them. "Let's begin," he said calmly. My father leaned forward. "We're ready to negotiate repayment with the lender. We just need them to see reason." My mother nodded quickly. "And once they understand our history, I'm sure they'll realize none of this was intentional." Families make mistakes. We just need compassion. I watched them speak as if they were the victims, not the architects. For a moment, I wondered how many years they had spent rehearsing this kind of denial. Ethan folded his hands. Mr. and Mrs. Collins, I need to clarify something before we move forward. My father frowned. Clarify what? Ethan slid the first document across the table. I'm not here as a representative of the lender. My mother blinked rapidly. Then who are you representing? Ethan turned slightly toward me. Miss Harper Collins. The acquiring party. The legal controller of your debt. Silence. The kind that pulls every molecule of air out of a room. Olivia's eyes widened first. My mother's hand flew to her necklace. My father's face drained completely. You, my mother whispered, voice cracking. You're the lender now. I met her gaze evenly. No. I'm the person who now owns the debt you forged my name to secure. It felt like dropping a stone into a lake. Quiet impact, ripples everywhere. My father slammed his hand against the table. Do you have any idea what you've done? Yes, I said softly. I protected myself from the mess you created with my name. You could have talked to us, he snapped. I raised an eyebrow. You didn't talk to me when you used my identity. You didn't talk to me when you forged my signature. You didn't talk to me when you told people I was homeless. My mother shut her eyes, tears forming not of guilt but of fear. Olivia inhaled sharply. This isn't fair, Harper. You have money. You don't need this. I studied her, the sister whose entire life had been built on being everything I supposedly wasn't. You're right. I don't need your house, or your boutique, or your approval, but I do need my name back. Ethan slid the second set of documents forward. Here are your options, he said, tone steady. 1. Sell the property to resolve the debt. 2. Transfer ownership to Miss Collins and remain as tenants under a structured rental contract. My father stared at the papers like they were written in a language he had never learned. You want us to rent our own home. I corrected him gently. It's not your home anymore. Olivia choked on a breath. You're ruining us. No, I replied. I'm ending the part where you take things from me without asking. My mother leaned forward desperately. Harper, we're your family. I shook my head. You're people I share DNA with. Family is something you earn. The line hung in the air, quiet, final. My father's voice broke in a way I had never heard. What do you want from us? Nothing, I said. Not your apology, not your money, not a relationship. Just accountability. I watched the weight of the words settle onto their shoulders, heavy and unmistakable. The meeting lasted only a few minutes more. They signed acknowledgement of receipt. Ethan set the timeline, 7 days to choose, or the decision defaulted to me. They left in a silence that felt like truth finally resting where it belonged. Olivia turned at the door, tears streaking down her face. You could have saved us. I looked at her without anger. I did, just not in the way you wanted. When the door closed, the room felt different, lighter, not triumphant. This was not victory. It was closure. I exhaled slowly, feeling a weight lift that I had carried since childhood. For the first time, the distance between me and them felt intentional, not forced. But here is the hook, the question that cracks this story open even wider. Do you think they'll choose to sell? Or will they try to stay in a home that no longer belongs to them? Tell me what you think, because the decision they make next changes everything that follows. After the confrontation dinner, the world outside moved the same as always. Traffic lights glowed, people hurried home, restaurants filled with laughter, but inside me, something had shifted into a stillness I had never known. Not the stunned silence of being hurt, not the empty silence of being ignored. This was the silence of release. For the first time in years, I felt like I was not carrying anyone else's story on my back, only my own. But for my family, that week was not calm. It was the slow unraveling of everything they had built on lies, forged documents, and the comforting belief that I would never push back. Ethan sent me updates each day, each message precise and clinical. Day 1. No response from the Collins family. Calls not returned. Day 2. Confirmed they met with a financial advisor. No viable options. Day 3. Olivia inquired about emergency refinancing. Declined. Day 4. Internal conflict reported. Parents blaming Olivia, Olivia blaming them. By day 5, my phone buzzed with a message from Mason. They're spiraling, he wrote. Like, aggressively spiraling. Lots of crying, lots of blame, zero accountability. I stared at the message for a moment, then typed back. They had years to choose accountability. Now they're choosing consequences. He replied with a single line. Harper, you're calmer than all three of them combined. I didn't know if that was a compliment or a diagnosis, but it was true. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger requires energy, and I had spent too many years powering a story that was never mine. On day 6, Ethan called. They requested an extension, he said. No, I answered immediately. He paused, then said quietly, understood. I wasn't refusing out of cruelty. I was refusing because extensions are for people who tried. My family didn't try, they gambled. With my name, which meant they had to own their loss, exactly the way I had owned the weight of their rejection for years. By day 7, the deadline, the email arrived. Subject: official decision, property sale authorization. I opened it without hesitation. They chose to sell the house they bragged about at every holiday, the boutique Olivia used as her personal stage, the renovations they flaunted on social media, all of it built on a forged signature I never gave them permission to use. Ethan called minutes later. They've signed the full release. Your name is cleared. Everything now moves to closing. I thanked him, then sat on my couch for a long moment, letting the enormity of it settle. Not with triumph, not with grief, just with truth. My family wasn't destroyed. They weren't broken. They weren't left destitute. They just had to live within the reality they created. A smaller home, fewer luxuries, a life scaled to honesty instead of illusion. And somehow, that felt fair. In the days that followed, my father withdrew from the social circles he once dominated. My mother stopped posting inspirational family quotes on Facebook. Olivia announced her boutique was pivoting toward a new creative chapter, which was an elegant way of saying it was shutting down. But what surprised me most was that none of them contacted me. Not to apologize, not to beg, not even to lash out. Silence. Heavy, meaningful silence. And for the first time, it didn't hurt. I went back to my routines, my work, my life in Seattle, the world I built with my own 2 hands. I walked through my penthouse without hearing their voices echoing in the corners of my mind. I slept without replaying their disapproval. I breathed without waiting for permission. The absence of them felt like space, air, freedom. One afternoon, while reviewing a new product strategy with my team, a realization hit me with quiet finality. I didn't just win. I stepped out of a story that never belonged to me, and I didn't need them to know that. But here's the part that keeps surprising people when they hear this story. I didn't feel victorious. I felt steady, like the ground had finally stopped tilting under my feet. Later that evening, I walked outside as rain misted over the city. The streets shimmered. I felt the kind of peace that doesn't ask for applause, it just lives quietly inside you. That was the moment I understood something important. My revenge was never the house, never the debt, never the power shift. My revenge was becoming someone their lies could no longer hold. And here's the hook, the part that always starts arguments in the comments. If your family treated you the way mine did, would you give them a second chance, or block them like a spam caller? Tell me below. Bonus points if you make it funny. This story has been dramatic enough. The morning after the sale became official, I woke before my alarm, no jolt of anxiety, no lingering heaviness, just a quiet clarity I hadn't felt since childhood, the kind of clarity that arrives when the storm has finally passed. Not because the world forced it to, but because you walked yourself out of it. For the first time in a long while, the silence in my apartment didn't feel like loneliness, it felt like choice. I made coffee and stood by the window, watching the light drip slowly across the Seattle skyline. Below me, the city moved as it always had, steady, indifferent, alive. But I felt different, lighter, more rooted, as if something I'd been carrying since the moment I learned to understand my parents' tones had finally slipped off my shoulders. Not because I defeated them, but because I stopped trying to belong to a place that had never been built for me. The sale closed smoothly. Ethan handled the final signatures with his usual precision, sending me confirmation that my name was fully removed from every record tied to the debt. It was done legally, financially, emotionally. My family moved into a smaller home across town. Not ruined, not broken, just living at a scale that matched the truth instead of the illusion they clung to for so many years. Olivia shut down her boutique. She posted online about entering a season of reflection, a phrase that probably sounded more poetic than the reality behind it. Still, I didn't wish her failure. I didn't wish any of them suffering. I simply wished for distance, the kind that heals instead of wounds. I didn't reach out, neither did they, and that silence said more than any apology ever could. But here's something I never expected. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady, whole, aligned with myself in a way I'd never been before. People think revenge is the moment you watch someone fall, but real revenge, the kind that actually frees you, is when their actions no longer have any power over your peace. In the weeks that followed, my life returned to its rhythm: morning coffee, meetings, product reviews, long walks in the cool air along the waterfront. I was still the same person, just no longer living under the quiet weight of waiting for my family to love me in a way they were never capable of. Some nights, I would catch myself remembering small moments from childhood, the blurred photos, the forgotten achievements, the awards shoved in the kitchen drawer. For years, those memories stung like fresh cuts. But now, they felt distant, like scenes from someone else's life that I had finally stepped out of. Healing doesn't always look like forgiveness. Sometimes it looks like acceptance. Sometimes it looks like choosing yourself so fully that no one's opinion can shrink you again. One evening, as the sky dimmed and the city lights blinked awake, I walked out onto my balcony. The air was cool, crisp. I inhaled deeply and felt something inside me settle into place. I wasn't waiting anymore for approval, for recognition, for the version of family I had always imagined but never received. I had built a life without their validation, and now I was living it without their shadow. Peace, I realized, is not the absence of conflict. It is the absence of needing anything from people who refuse to see you. I haven't spoken to my parents or to Olivia since the dinner. Not out of anger, not out of stubbornness, but out of understanding. They had written me out of their story long before they forged my name. I finally stopped writing myself back in. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't fighting. It's stepping away and letting the truth stand on its own. A few days ago, I received a message from a woman named Clara, someone who had followed my work for years. She wrote, "You don't owe anyone the version of you they created to make themselves comfortable." I read it twice, then once more, because for the first time, the words felt like they belonged to me. 3 weeks earlier, my father had pointed at the door and told me to go live in the streets. Now I was standing in a home I built, in a life I shaped, in a peace I chose, and the distance between us didn't feel like loss. It felt like freedom, because some endings aren't tragedies. Some endings are doors. And this one, the one I walked through alone, finally led somewhere I could breathe. If you're listening to this, and any part of it feels familiar, if you've ever carried the weight of someone else's version of you, if you've ever been pushed out only to discover your strength on the other side, then maybe my story is a reminder you didn't know you needed. And here's the hook, the question that turns every ending into a beginning. Have you ever walked away from someone who never thought you would? Tell me in the comments, and if you want more stories that hit the heart the way this one did, make sure to subscribe. The next chapter might be the one you've been waiting